So Alexis, I think you were going to kind of facilitate. I was looking through some of the questions too, so there's good to bring up.
Let me get them kind of organized. Sorry, it'll take me just a second.
Cassie, your glasses look really funny. That's awesome.
I know, I don't really know how to change that, so.
I want to get mine to reflect like that.
All right, so this is a question. I don't know if it was directed at anybody. It said increased trade with Asian countries leads to increased number of invasive pests from Asia, giant Asian hornet, Japanese beetle, Asian strain of gypsy moth, etc. So I think what they're asking is, does it increase trade with these other countries increase our chances of coming across invasive pests?
I can answer a little bit of that. And if you look historically about the different pests that we deal with here in the Pacific Northwest, you'll see that much of the pest compositions are old world pests, meaning that they came from Europe originally, and that was our most significant wave of introduced species here in North America in the Pacific Northwest. But yes, in recent years, if you look at the new insect pests that we deal with here, in not just the Pacific Northwest, but also in North America, much of the environments that we trade with are along the Pacific Rim, and that's where we do deal with some of those hitchhikers coming from along the Pacific Rim, going from eastern Russia seaboard to the Southeast Asia. So yeah, that was a good observation, and that is where I'm sure we still get European pests, but we're already saturated with European species. So as more trade routes open, we're gonna pick up pests from other parts of the world.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. The next question is, I've noticed lately that some friends on social media are purchasing butterflies online as pets, or those kits where like you raise them and then release them. Is this market being investigated / followed? I only imagine that these sales are not locally sourced and that they could be a threat.
Carla or Cassie, if you want to answer that one, feel free. I do know that WSDA does have a permitting route for many of those species to be sold and traded within the state and entering the state, but I don't know if you have more information to share on that.
I don't really, unfortunately. What I can say is that I think there is a good opportunity to remind people that bringing in other types of insects or plants from other areas can introduce new pests and diseases. And so people should be cautious about that. One of the presentations I do, I'm a master gardener as well, and I have a little game about whether social media advice, gardening advice down on social media is actually good advice or not. And one of those things, for example, is just like buying ladybugs and releasing them in your garden, and then helping people understand that those are not native ladybugs to Washington State. They outcompete local native ladybugs, and they also introduce new diseases. So I think there's a lot to be said about gardening and other things you might see on social media, but how butterflies are regulated is something I would have to look into. USDA probably knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, definitely send us an email and we'll follow up. Just a note on any type of unwanted pet or animal or school specimen, there is a network that the council has. It's under our campaigns called Don't Let It Loose. And we actually created partnerships with over 900 veterinarian clinics, animal rescue centers, as well as pet stores a number of years ago. And you can go there, see an interactive map, and you can find a facility near your location that can provide you technical assistance or maybe even help with rehoming, whatever it is that you don't want. Not specifically to butterflies, but for anything, it's definitely a good resource.
The
Thank
vector
you all. Oh, go ahead,
internet
Ray.
trade, though, is really tricky to pin down. That's one that we're going to have to watch in the future, because I think it could be, you know, there's a potential there for a lot of stuff to get in without us knowing about it.
Next question, and this I think is anybody could answer this one. How do you get the word out on which invasive species we should watch for in our local area? It's a great question.
Sign up to the Invasive Species Council social media. That's the most reliable spot to where all our agencies and institutes are funneling our information to.
Also say that the county weed boards, they're the ones who really are, at least for the plant kingdom, they're the ones that have the priorities all mapped out for each county throughout the state. So locally, that would be your main main thing you'd want to look for as far as plants go.
Yeah, I agree to add to that. This is Justin, and starting with the statewide priority list is a good place. At invasivespecies.wa.gov. That list is built on the regulatory list of a number of different agencies, but definitely your local Washington State University Extension Office or local Noxious Weed Control Board can help you create a tailored list for your area, and we can also help with that if you reach out.
These next two questions I think are for you, Justin. Was the reported pike at the mouth of the Entiat River last summer ever confirmed?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've had a number of different scares of northern pike being downstream of Grand Coulee Dam and Chief Joseph Dam, none of which have been confirmed. There is a state response plan that's in process right now, but the framework has been in place for a while, and where there is a suspected sighting, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and partners deploys to do early detection monitoring using eDNA sampling, as well as visual surveys and interviewing anglers. And to date, we don't know that northern pike are below Chief Joseph or Grand Coulee Dam. So if you are in the area downstream, you should have a heightened awareness. And if you see something, say something, let us know. And remember, catch, kill, and report. Don't let it loose. We have had situations in Lake Washington where fish have been released after being found, and we would like to prevent that if possible.
Another question for you, Justin. Is the only way to get rid of northern pike to remove them from a water body? For example, are there any other ways to kill them without harming other fish, like aquatic pesticide granules, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not a technical expert in fish control. It's my understanding that in some scenarios you can apply pesticides such as rotenone to fully kill all the fish in the water body, and then you can do a lake restoration and reintroduce things that should be there. I know that's been done a few different times by the Department of Fish and Wildlife at the state. And if you email me, I can help connect you with those folks. There's also gill netting for suppression, as well as like electrofishing, and then also like angling for things like suppression of northern pike minnow, which is a different species. USDA Wildlife Services actually does hook and line angling from tailways in hydroelectric facilities. So there's a few different options for suppression. Eradication is slightly different, and hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Carla,
You
this
might
one I think.
Wait,
Oh,
I'm just going to say, that we had Joe talk about the whole program. Joe Maroney last year gave a presentation at the Weed Conference on the program up in the northeastern part of the state. So
Good resource. Carla, I think this one was for you. Is BTK available or used on forested lands, private, state, and federal, to minimize the risk of catastrophic wildfires from massive tree kills from the moths?
Not in Washington state that I'm aware of. We use it for gypsy moth eradications, and those are always targeted based on our trapping results. Back east, they use a couple different types of pesticides. They usually use something a bit stronger than BTK, as far as I know. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And then this, I think, could be for you or for Cassie. Basically, what are our partners in British Columbia doing to control the Asian giant hornets?
Sure, I can take that. So we've been working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture in BC since the beginning. We report to each other. For example, BC will be coming out later this afternoon with a report that Asian giant hornet was caught in Abbotsford, I think yesterday. So they've already told us about that. So we communicate very frequently together about what's happening in our states, as well as, for example, BC at one point in the summer attempted some protein-based traps where we've been using carbohydrate-based traps with orange juice. And they tried those and they found that they weren't catching anything, not even the native, wasps that you would expect to find in there. So they switched back to the OJ traps, and that's, one less thing that we have to try. So we are working very closely together. When we started having those detections in the East Blaine area, multiple detections, they set up a trapping line basically right on the other side of the border, and they did in fact catch one there. Hopefully those will stop coming through in that area now that we've finished the eradication. But yeah, I can say that we've been working really closely together. We're not at all of the meetings that each other has, but we do have regular updates that we give each other. And if there's any important developments, we send those over, very quickly. So it's been great working with BC.
Great, thank you. The next question is for me. It is, what is the reporting app's name? So I have an iPhone. If you search for it in the iPhone app store, it's WA space invasives, so WA invasives. And I don't know if you can see it. It kind of looks like that. That's what it looks like. It's not great, but you can search for it in the app store. So it's called WA invasives if you want to download the reporting app. That was a great question.
And just
And it's on Android too.
If you have an Android phone, it's Washington Invasives. But if you search either the acronym or the full name in either, it should find it.
You can also go to our website and click on like report an invasive, and it's got the direct links right there. If you do it from your phone, it should just bring it up in the app store of whatever device that you have. I'm just scrolling through to see if we had any other lingering questions.
While we're waiting, could the panelists all smile and wave? I'm going to take a screenshot on 3. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Oh, this one, it might have been, it didn't specify a person. Carla and or Cassie, are there copies available of the Asian giant hornet PowerPoints that people could have?
My PowerPoints aren't typically like available on our website. If there's a request for a PowerPoint, I can send it someone's way.
Okay.
And same here. I don't think it's available to download anywhere, but I could make it that way.
And I did want to remind everybody attending the webinar today, it is going to be recorded and it will be posted later. But if you wanted a specific PowerPoint from one of the presenters, please feel free to email them, and at their discretion, they can see if that would work for you.
Alexis, there's one here I might take. It's
go for it.
From Michael Bush. You realize honeybees are invasives, European praying mantis are invasive, or at least non-native. So it is important to note that a lot of species here are not from here. And as a council, that's kind of part of our job, is to really evaluate which ones are, potentially harmful and, unwanted versus ones that we can tolerate. And then the nursery industry has a big stake in this, obviously, but also the pet trade. There's a bunch of people out there that would like to make money off of species. So anyway, the fact is that we would want to make sure, even if they are non-native, that they're not doing any damage, economic or environmental. And that's kind of where we draw the line, right, Justin?
Yeah, that's a great summary, Mr. Chair. So in integrated pest management, there are action thresholds, and where things don't meet the damages to trigger that action, then a lot of times we wouldn't actually regulate that species and would not consider it to be invasive species legally or noxious weed. So there are lots of introduced species that have minimal or no impacts, and it's okay. Not every species needs to be native to the state of Washington. Where they're not damaging and they don't meet that threshold of economic, environmental, or any other type of damage, then we learn to live with it. And where something is impactful to a degree that it can't be lived with, then we try to take action where possible. And I guess I'd defer to our friends from the Department of Agriculture or WSU to weigh in.
Ditto.
Perfect. Well, we only have a couple minutes left. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I think we're in the home stretch for some of these questions there, but I'm searching through the ones that have been asked more than once, but this one's new. For Carla or Cassie, are Asian giant hornets considered a big threat to areas with cold winters like Eastern Washington?
So, you want to take this one, Cassie?
Go ahead.
So actually, this is a good WSU question because some researchers from Washington State University did kind of some modeling to determine what habitat would be suitable for Asian giant hornets. And it basically comes down to the West Coast, everything west of the Cascade Mountains in Washington, Oregon, and California. And then this is all oversimplified, but everything east of the Mississippi is also ideal habitat. Central Washington in particular, not so much, but there are some areas over like Spokane where you start getting more like trees. I can say that because I grew up in Georgia. So where there is some suitability, but generally it's the, Western Washington is perfect habitat. So if your climate is different than that, it's less suitable.
Yeah, just add that was a recent paper published out of the David Crowder lab here at the Department of Entomology, and they took a number of factors in to try and understand the risk areas across the continent. And a lot of that had to do with human population densities, because we're most likely to move some of this stuff around, and other variables to really hone in areas of potential risk. If anybody's interested in that publication, I can provide that too.
There is a link to the publication on our Hornets webpage that Cassie mentioned earlier. So as well as another study on DNA analysis. So
Great. Well, that brings us to time. Ray, if you wanted to say anything else before we head out, thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate it. Hope you learned something. It was a little unusual in the way that we had to do this, but there's a lot of great topics today.
Yes, thanks everybody. And if you, like I said at the start, we do want evaluations from folks. And if this happen to be the only day that you're going to be attending, then please, I think, Michael, we're going to get an evaluation that'll pop up at the very end here. But don't bother filling that out if you're going to be sticking around for other days. And with that, thanks for everybody's attendance today. And we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow and the next day, and hopefully the next day too. So goodbye, everybody.